All right, guys, welcome to the Not Safe for Work podcast, where Sean and I literally just shoot the shit for during lunchtime. So if you feel like this is your thing, this is live, but when it's recorded, feel free to subscribe down below and join us on these live sessions because it's actually fun talking with you guys on the chats and seeing how you guys react and stuff like that. But today we got a special one. I know this is kind of a topic that's been around for a while, but I think we both want to kind of touch on this whole like Senator Karen. Oh, sorry, I mean Elizabeth Warren and the Elon Musk situation. I mean, no matter what your political ties are, it is one of those things that I think you would want to be kind of interested in because I mean, before, just my opinion on this is before, just high level opinion, before Elon got to this whole richest guy on earth, blah blah blah, all this, right? He was kind of so obscure where he was just an electric car guy, or he was the guy that Iron Man was based on. He was that guy. He was just a different guy. And then now that he's in this, hot seat of political and financial tension, all of a sudden he's become like the Dr. Evil of the of the community, and all the politicians are going after him. So,
yeah.
What do you think about that, Sean? Kick it off.
It's funny. I think like the image of Tony Stark as Iron Man is like the perfect explanation of like there are going to be half the world is going to absolutely love him no matter what he does or what he says or how he goes about it. And the other half is going to hate him no matter what he does, says, or goes about it. It's so funny because whenever we see sort of like these ultra eccentric types, which I think flows in really nicely to like being frankly like a genius. And genius doesn't mean you can do, long mathematical problems in your head. Genius can be the way you execute and go to market. And I think that we see this recurring theme all the time. Like, and listen, I'm not saying whether these are good dudes, not good dudes, whatever. But every time you see this like massive scaling innovation, rather than figuring out like, hey, maybe we need some guardrails, it turns into like, this is an evil person. They do nothing. Can I just debunk something here? This is not even Elon related, but like, listen, I'm in Massachusetts. Warren is from Massachusetts. I don't even know how she keeps winning, but like, here's the thing. Like, there's this recurring thing that goes around all the time. This isn't about like defending a billionaire or anything like that. This is just in general. There's this thing going around where people are like, it's not fair that they pay no taxes and I pay all these taxes. First of all, a majority of people pay very little in taxes. These are data points that you can look up anywhere. And like, if you're getting money back, right, you're already below the rates as it is. So a lot of folks have this idea of like, he only pays 10% taxes and I pay 50% taxes. No, you don't. Literally, you don't. And this isn't how it works. And like, I keep seeing this other thing of like, did you know that Jeff Bezos makes $1 million an hour? Yeah. Jeff Bezos' salary is public knowledge. He does not make $1 billion a year. He owns a piece of a company, or Elon for that matter as well. Like, don't confuse salary with owning a company whose value continues to increase, right? Like this is the fundamental issue right off the back, that we don't take the time to understand how things work because we're looking for talking points to complain. Like,
everybody wants to complain. That's the problem, right? I mean, on the whole point of Jeff Bezos, there's a guy. Oh man, I can't remember his name now. I really should prepare for this more. But there's a guy on LinkedIn, and he's like a CEO of some like fintech company, and he constantly attacks Jeff Bezos, right? And I think he's a pretty like he's on Fox News and stuff.
Yep.
But anyway, so like he talked about it. He's like, man, Jeff Bezos is same thing, $1 million an hour, whatever the case is, right?
Yep.
And it's like, as a CEO, you should be like sending out information that's more knowledgeable than just the same talking points that the talking heads on the news talk about. And on top of that, just to touch on your point, like people don't understand the difference between like net worth and like salary, for example, right? Like it's not like Jeff Bezos is literally depositing $1 million every hour into a bank account or something.
It's funny because like you can see how when we boil away all the water and we get down to the bottom, it's all politics leading all of this. And I think that it's easy to pin it in on like a Bezos or Elon as an example because they're so obviously, easy targets. Like it's like you said, it's Tony Stark. Like one person sees Tony Stark as saving everyone, the other half sees it as a destructive weapon manufacturer. It's like, I get it. The problem is though, there's so much technology that comes out of these services that we don't think about. Like the idea of being able to order something on your phone is due to last mile delivery and the infrastructure and the build of that. The ability to like even be talking about self-driving cars. And I think that, you know, what's so funny. I'll give you a great example too. A couple weeks ago, I had said like, hey, you know, my channel was growing and I wanted to do some donations. Once I get over a certain amount, we hit it. I posted that video, did a bunch of donations. And this is something I do in my regular life anyways, because, you know, it's just something I do. But I want to call this out. Like, that's no one's business, right? So like, there's this thing of like, well, instead of putting a rocket into space, why isn't he curing hunger? It's like, guys, this is like, what does that mean? We can't both have like massive amounts of innovation at scale while the entire time we're doing it, be screaming at the very people who are doing it. And this constant rhetoric, and by the way, I know like it's a funny thing behind on the screen here, but like, it's not a question of like being on the right or the left or liberal, conservative, or Republican or Democrat. Yeah. It's more like what so many of these people do affects their finances, have no meaningful effect on our lives in any kind of way. Personally, I don't want Elon to not have control of Tesla. He's doing amazing, innovative things, and he's doing it because he owns the shares in the company, right? So when I see these, when I see these things like we need to start taxing wealth or like, you know,
unrealized gains, right?
Unrealized gains. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I think to myself like, oh my God, like where does it end? Because once you open the valve and start letting those tax dollars out, we're never going to know where they go. First of all, nothing's ever going to change. Like I've got news for everyone. If you think that like grabbing another couple of billion from Elon is somehow going to like make your life better, it is not going to make your life better. And the same thing goes, just to be fair to both sides. It's the same thing as when we see some of these like silliness on the right as well, where like they're spending, you know, all this time, money, and energy in things that are already done deals, and they just keep spinning their wheels and wasting their time on that front. Yeah. Like, I'm just like, can we just get to a moderate place where we do the right things as much as possible? How about some accountability on the finances? Because here's the deal: like, Elon may be the today's wealthiest person in the world, whether he is or not by a couple of billion doesn't matter. But the reality is, in the scheme of things, that money comes over. What's up, Drew? That money comes over to the government's control, and it's gone. I would rather so like, and let's even back up a bit too. I see this tons of stuff like these bald rich assholes are sending rockets into space. Yeah, I understand that like what a person is seeing is like, first of all, the worst designed rocket of all time by looks. Let's just call it what it is. But like the whole
or the best, depending on who you ask.
That's fair. That's a good point. Yeah, Dr. Evil loves the shape of the rocket. But you look at it, and it's very easy to say like, what a complete waste. It's like you guys understand like, hey, these things right here. Yeah. How do you think things move around? Like they're already doing this stuff. They're already getting rockets up there. We have to start figuring out other ways to use technology. We measure weather, geo change, climate change.
Oh man, people don't understand the implications. No, you're right. It's funny because like I was always infatuated with space and that kind of stuff from before. So I knew this stuff coming in. And actually I knew about Blue Origin before I did SpaceX, which makes sense in a way because they did open before. But the thing was, like, there's so much in our modern life that we have to attest to, all the research and stuff that things have International Space Station has permitted, or just general space travel in general, like CDs. For a while before we even had anything like CDs, one of the things that was invented in space, technically, right? Like literally the non-lead pencil or whatever, right? Before it had lead, now it's like graphite. All that stuff is from space. I mean, not to mention all the countless amount of like the VLAN cables, right? That we're not going to see just yet, but once it starts getting cheaper, it's going to really increase the fiber optic type of like connection speed and all that stuff, latency and all this. So like they wouldn't have never been able to figure out the whole like striations and the damages of this VLAN cable unless they tested to make it in space. It's like so many things could benefit us down here. So when I hear the argument of, oh, you need to solve like the problems here before you go out there, like bitch, we are doing that. Like this is part of that. Like this is part of that solving the problem here part.
It's this constant drumbeat of like, if you aren't solving what's important to me, you're a terrible bad person. It's like, I've got news for everybody.
Yeah,
it's all important, and everyone has to be working on it. But sometimes we have to find commercialization. It's funny because like you think about a lot of times we focus on like military and defense. So much of the technology and medicine that we have comes directly out of the funding in that space. by no stretch am I
Oh,
saying
dude, the internet comes from the DoD model. So it's
exactly.
like people, I don't know if anyone knows that, but the whole entire internet was based on like this DoD model that people have spun up. And then they sort of made it public so that universities and stuff can talk to each other way back in the day.
Yep.
Like, come on.
Yeah, and it's just like I think what's scary about it, and I see this post on Twitter on both sides, by the way,
Yeah.
is well, both sides are simultaneously saying like, why can't we just talk about these things? Neither can. And I think that but the problem is like there's so many who are in the middle who are like, look, here's the deal, like we should all be giving to people who need it more. We should
Yeah.
all be focusing on innovating and driving the future. Because the reality is like a lot of stuff we do up in space and we design to send things to space comes back with my gosh, I mean just think like ultra lightweight products end up commercialized and then we end up having less stress on the ecosystem, right?
Right.
But instead of like I guess what I want to hear is instead of like Warren going and screaming on every channel that'll let her talk about Elon being too wealthy, like
Yeah.
what? How about you demand that? How about you come out and say I want more money going into R&D? Like, hey,
Yeah.
you don't like share buybacks? I'll tell you what. Instead of share buybacks, start a campaign to say that money should go into R&D. I'd still think that's insane, but like I'd rather that than just internet's just a fad. This is true, Drew. I just think like we don't have a level of education to understand that innovation requires doing innovative things. Like you have to try to change the way something is, and it's so tough because I think that like there's a ton of hate you get for doing these things, and for the record too, like this isn't like some dude who like felt the stories of like, well, he came from a wealthy family. It's like, oh my God, will you please stop it? Like, stop it. Like,
why? Because he was an engineer. Like, please.
Started PayPal, used all of his own money to build a car company, has been wildly successful. And it's not like, listen, I mean, this dude's not like riding elephants to work with a Ferrari on each foot. I mean, like, he lives in a little house. He does this thing. Yeah, he could have whatever he wants for sure. But that's clearly not what his passion is. He's not sitting in a yacht in the middle of the Mediterranean. I mean, there's plenty of people we could target. I hardly think going after the most innovative people in our country are the right ones. And
it sends a bad signal too, right? That's the thing. I think the U.S. has been like a sort of melting pot of all sorts of different cultures, societies, and like intellect levels and all this other stuff that sort of immigrated or sort of developed there from the beginning. And this sends a really bad message in a way that, for one, it tells you that your politicians are a little bit incompetent. And I'll get to the point of this. Like, I have no hate towards Elizabeth Warren apart from like the stuff that she's talking about now.
Sure.
I don't go one way or another. To be very honest, I'm kind of like in the middle. I watch both streams and stuff, right? So politically speaking, I'm kind of like agnostic. But regardless of the fact, like it sends this message to people that want to immigrate here, and it's a hard country to immigrate to. To be honest with you, so it's not exactly something that sends a signal saying like, why would they want to go through this process to come here and potentially provide and commit to the society? And forget the people immigrating, even the people there, right? It's like, okay, well, what's the point of me getting to the point where, like Elon is an inspiration, Jeff Bezos, these guys are all inspirations, right? So why would you even look up to that and aspire to that if potentially someone's going to be out there trying to chop you down, right? I think though, to be honest, Sean, like I honestly feel like there's two parts to this. One of them is, I think, FOMO. I think maybe Elon and some of these, Bezos and a lot of these guys try to touch on societal points that actually make sense to people, because they are people at the end of the day. They're not trying to like lie and get through and all this other stuff, right? So they, like Elon with this whole Twitter stuff, and Jeff Bezos brought up all the climate stuff that he's potentially like, donating to and all this, right? Like they touch on stuff that we can sit at, like, for example, on a podcast and talk about. So it makes sense to people, but then politicians, they're so far gone, I feel like, from like the public scope, where like Warren is pretty much running the Bernie playbook for the most part, right? Trying to get the same folks.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's where I think the problem is here, to be honest.
I mean, there's so much irony in a lot of this stuff, because I think one of the best things if you're a person who's watching this and you're on the younger end of the spectrum, I think it's really important to understand that they're not saying these things always because they believe them. They're saying them because they're trying to get votes. And that's the reality, because they need the money from their job, which is to get you to vote for them. And that's not to say there aren't good politicians. I don't think that's the case or not. But I just think that if you really look back, like, are these the innovators? No, these are the regulators.
Right.
And regulation is good, and guardrails are good, and things are safe, and all that kind of good stuff. But the reality is, like, as we're talking about like whether or not we should be hammering this person, he's opening up new factories, creating new jobs. deriving new technology. And just to pivot in a funny second here, because I think that's a funny one, but like just to slightly pivot. You ever notice that every time something really good happens with Tesla, there's always like the stock is always down the next day? It's like every time there's an announcement or a show or like a big new product release, like somehow it goes down. And I feel like it's like this constant. It's almost like an opportunity, really, too, to like level with the spring.
Yeah, no, I know it's true. There's always something, man. I don't know. I just feel like it's FOMO. I think there's this is definitely not over. I feel like this is not 2.0 because they were going at it for some time a few months ago. But I'm telling you, there's going to be more of this. And unfortunately, I'm going to call it out again like I did the last time. But the unfortunate part of all this, straight up, is education. I think the problem here is, and I know this because like I went to those schools, the schools that people don't go to. I went there, like that was my upbringing, and I know like we were taught not to like the rich guys because we were like they had to take something from you almost, right, for them to go there. So like don't trust nobody, don't and in a way you're almost raised in this closed-mindedness to a point where you're not able to see the other side. Even when you see it, even if it makes sense to you, you're training from before. You're like, don't believe that shit, man. It's not real. Like these guys are out there to get you. And when you realize you actually have nothing for them to take, then you're like, okay, I gotta start asking some questions here, right? So that's the problem. Like I gotta call it out. It's definitely the education. People need to be more aware of their. I'm not talking about like hardcore. I don't want people to go and read candlesticks and all that bullshit. I'm talking about just learn the difference between net worth and your paycheck. For example, Jeff Bezos earns, I think he pays himself like $75,000 to $100,000 a year. That's a salary, right? His net worth is tied into to Amazon stock or whatever the case is. Actually, he probably doesn't pay himself anymore since he's not working, not technically an Amazon employee, but whatever. That was the salary when he was there. So like people need to understand the difference. All of this is public knowledge. It's just that unfortunately we live in this oddly large echo chamber of a society where if you go on Facebook, you get stuff that you like or whatever fed to you. Like my parents are a great example. They're always messaging me like, oh, okay. And of course, a lot of immigrants vote liberal, right? That's just how it is, or vote like Democrat. And the thing is, it's like they do it so blindly because if we go to their Facebook feed, it's all catered to one. They don't see the other side at all. And if they do, it's like some fear mongering post where it's like, I don't know, I'm just making this up at this point, but like Tucker Carlson like with like blood and it's like crazy stupid shit. A really common cases of this is like in like Vietnamese communities, I think it is, where there's only one guy trying to translate from CNN or from Fox or whatever into Vietnamese. It's like, it's tough, man. So I feel like it's education that needs to happen here. People really need to understand what actually makes these people wealthy and successful and stuff like that. Now, am I saying that there's no rich people that probably stepped on other people's toes? No, for sure. But 100%. In this case of Elon and Bezos and some of these people, you can see it. It's all public information as to how they came up. So, people just need to research more.
I heard a really funny one the other day where someone was screaming about like we should make buybacks illegal. And I was like, of all things, why would stock buybacks be illegal? And they said, well, because they cause inflation. And I was like, what? The explanation I was given was so categorically incorrect. It was like mind numbing to hear it. And it was like, well, why would a company have released those shares if they knew they didn't need them? And I was like, oh my goodness. Like you have
stuff like that.
Well, like you've got conviction on a topic you don't even understand. That's one of the reasons why I think I've done really well over the years is I'm willing to shift my conviction the moment the data tells me I'm wrong or incorrect. But it starts with recognizing that I don't know much, right? Like there's things I consider myself to be an expert in, and there's things I know nothing about. If I know nothing, I do my own due diligence. I understand both sides, the bull cases, the bear cases, the left, the right, whatever. And whether it's investing or it's voting, I always tend to look at the independent situation, not the talking line. And it's funny because this is a great Necra, just the question here on buybacks. They don't cause anything. Like if you have 100 shares at $100 and you buy back 100. In theory, those 50 are now worth 200. It's the same market cap. The idea behind it is that there's less shares, so the shares are more likely to rise faster than if there's more shares in the market. This is a big complaint with Palantir, actually, is there's too many shares in the market. But I don't even want to get into Palantir on this today. But just Shabari, what we got to talk about before we run out of time. Elon buying over 9% of Twitter. Like, dude, what do you think?
Dude, that was the most badass move ever. It's like Elon and his ability to just make like split decision. Yeah, obviously this is not split. Like there's something in the works already,
Yeah.
but the idea that it came out in such a split decision and nobody's known about this till like he's like, you know what, maybe I'll just do this and releases it is like so crazy to think that it's like I can't remember who it was. It was a reporter, but he was like, this guy's like the Howard Hughes combined with like a bunch of other guys. It's so true because he's so cathartic in a way, right? And in a way, it's kind of provides his own little entertainment. It's like really like that's the entertaining part. Now the impact of this, I honestly thought he was going to make his own, and I didn't think it was going to be like that great or whatever. I thought it was just going to be like this a smaller group, subset of people that joined, and it was going to be kind of like its own little space. But for him to take over Twitter is huge. Now the question is, the argument with Twitter is like, oh, they're not that profitable. Their ad space sucks and all this other stuff, right? Mm-hmm. Is he going to touch on that? Because I brought this up in one of my videos, but like when he's talking to Jack Dorsey and Kathy Wood, right? He actually talked about how he can potentially get, or he wanted to potentially get advertisers to use crypto to buy in. And this could save some money for the ad companies, right? Because they can have one singular account instead of having like different accounts with different banks and stuff. So there's going to be some creative kind of stuff that he potentially could do. I don't know if he'll do it, but we'll see.
There's a great line I heard years ago where one person said to another person in a meeting I was in, you know, we're playing chess, our competitors are playing we're playing checkers, our competitors are playing chess. And the consultant in the room was like, the problem is you don't even know how big of a scale they're playing on. Yeah. And I've heard this just recently, like in Billions, which is a show on TV, and they were talking about like what's great show. They were talking about like what is the scale, or they're playing chess at a city level. And I think about this all the time that like when he posts something, I'm starting to like see it over time. Like what can I derive from it to understand what? Like, do you want an edit button, or like, hey, do you think I should sell 10% of my shares? And then like, of course, he's already in the process of doing it.
Yeah.
But if there's one word that sums it up for me, it's just excitement. Like Twitter has been getting stagnant. They do have a history of censoring, and whether this is not a debate about whether it's right or wrong. It's more a question of like, I think there's deep-seated concerns that people have of like, well, who are the people who typically work in tech? How do they typically believe the system should work? And then on top of that, who are the fact checkers? Who are checking the fact checkers, right? Like you go down this pothole of like, I know this is the last place I want to go on a lunchtime call, but like, the problem is like things we thought 2.5 years ago that have been disproven now today were the same things that were being fact checked and being told were completely wrong. So it's it's a broken system. And there's also like no clear path to profit. It was so funny. I'll give you a funny one. I was on Twitter this morning. I was getting a ton of ads for Abbott. Abbott Laboratories.
Oh, Abbott Labs?
Right. I just, I have some Abbott in my portfolio, but it's completely disconnected from being on Twitter, right? And I haven't clicked on an app. Like, I don't even look at it. I was thinking like, oh my God, that's so funny. That's a good call, Marcus. Everyone does have to be their own fact checker. I want to talk about that in a second, but like, I was thinking like Abbott's advertising, but obviously they don't expect anyone to click there. It's not really an ad. It's more like, hello, we're here. Just so you know, don't forget about us, right? Because Pfizer's always everywhere else. The problem though with this, like you have to be your own fact checker thing is sometimes what you're presented with to get your information is someone else's view of what everything is. Like if I wanted to fact check, I'll give you a random one off the top of my head, Elon tax rate, right? Just for instance, and I Google it. Well, who's to say that first page of results is actually the reality of what the situation is? That's just what has been put on the plate in front of me, and I can easily be like,
what? Yeah, no, you're right, and this brings up like a good question. And maybe this is a topic for another day, but just real quick on this, right? Like, my question to this is, who gives a shit? Like for me, right? Marcus' point drives us home to the most point. Like, I look at stuff and I have to check if it makes sense, because for me, honestly, I'm a skeptic. Nothing makes sense. Like, I have a Palantir channel and I'm always doubting the company. Okay, so it's like for me, I'm like, is this right? Is this true? So you do have to have that mentality. And I think the second part of this, and again, this is another thing that we should probably talk about another time, but just to allude to this, like there's a lot of people, and there's a guy I know who actually makes YouTube content, and I kind of connected with him on Twitter, but he quit Twitter because he's like, oh, there's no free speech, and he's conservative for the most part, but he's a nice guy, and he's like all this other stuff, right? But the idea is he quit Twitter, and I messaged him like, dude, like I can't. How am I supposed to talk to you now? Like this is the only channel we did. we used. And for him, he's like, no, it's a free speech this and free speech that. And for me, I don't see that though, right? For me, I see both stuff. Like I see propaganda from one, from the other. I see all sorts of crazy dumb shit. So like, I don't know. I feel like maybe he went too far into like the algorithm front, and I don't know how that works. But the idea is that like, I don't know, if you get really offended, I think it's gonna really be a problem for you regardless. And on top of that, to be honest, I'm not trying to defend the companies, but it is in their shit where they can do whatever the hell they want. It's a free product.
Right? Oh, you just beat me. You beat me to exactly what I was going to say. Like, you have to ask yourself first and foremost, how much are you paying?
Yeah.
To use this platform. If the answer is zero, then don't use it. If you know, like I just don't understand how we can complain while paying nothing, and then be like I deserve a better experience. Go build it. Go build it.
No, it's funny you say that. Like when I was in school, we did this exact thing, and we polled people. Right, we're like, okay, this was for when we were trying to redo like WhatsApp or something, okay, just for fun. And we asked people like, oh, for extra features, would you guys pay a certain amount? Everyone in the first preliminary were like, yes, 60%, which is a huge margin. Yes, right. But then we actually made the app, and this wasn't to sell. It was just an actual it was called the Capstone project, and we actually pushed it into the market. Freaking nobody signed up for it. So it's like, you're not going to pay for it. You can't, you only have a certain amount of say, right? Now, some people have more of a say. I feel like Elon and people will have more of a say. It just is, it is what it is, right?
Sure.
But it's the reality of the situation we live in. So I feel like as long as, and I kind of hack it a little bit. I click on deliberate stuff just to like skew it a different way, to bring me back to the middle.
I do a lot of too on Twitter is I do a lot of muting. Just because I just don't want to hear it from things that I know are complete BS. So the more like outrageous crap I get out of there, the more I can enjoy when I'm looking at it.
What do you get? What do you get that just turns your freaking knobs?
I get a ton of like very, very, very left hate the rich stuff. And then I get a lot of like extremely hardcore stuff on the right, which is like
so polar,
like ultra Trump crazy, right? So like it's weird, and the reason is because like I'm willing to click on anything to get a 30-second read on it, but like I keep muting it, so I'm trying to close my walls in to get at least a limitation on to fall off on either edge, right? We're coming up on 27 and a half minutes here, and we're going to keep it at 30. So I've got kind of a funny thing. Complete breaking news. I think I may have decided to start another stealth startup today. I'm not going to give a lot of details on this, but I'm gonna ask you for a suggestion here. Okay. So I've done something similar a few times. I've previously sold a business. So you know me a little bit, Shabar. You know I'm in analytics and everything. So I'm not going to give a lot of details. So I preach all the time this idea of like, don't dig for gold, be the one selling the shovels.
Right.
So I'm gonna be working on something from a platform perspective to do this. I've got a question for you though. I think just really curious here. I can get an MVP up and running on my own, no problem there. I should have something by the end of the week. I'm 6 months out from announcing anything, at least 6 months, and I'm not looking to raise money either, so I'm in a good spot there. What I do find is really tough is finding like good quality full stack devs. What are you seeing out there, man? How tough is that right now? What are you seeing?
It's tough. It's mainly tough because the reason why most people find it tough is because they when they interview people, they try to think that they're Google and they just go with like algorithms, which anyone can fucking memorize, right? It's like it's not exactly a hard thing to do. You can just memorize on LeetCode. I think the ones that do well, so there's a company I work for, and they did this well. They ask contextual questions, and there were some folks that were like way better than me, but they didn't get the job, and I did because I was better suited for that context that they were doing. So it is really tough.
No theory. Give me a real example, practical example. Why is Shabari the best at this?
Yeah. No, for example, like one of the questions people like when you go and interview at a company, they'll say, "Oh, can you do bubble sort for this?" And it's like, why the hell would I do that? Like, I haven't done this in school. I'm not going to do bubble sort. Like, I've walked out of interviews for this reason. Whereas this company, actually, I'll tell you the name. It's called SPS Commerce. They're based in like Minnesota. And when they interviewed, they were like, okay, we have this like this algorithm, this predictive sort of loop that we're working on. We have this one bug that we have, but it was they were writing in C#. So I was like, okay, let me see what I can do. And what they wanted was they had a function that basically took like 3-4 different store procedures and tried to optimize on the fly. And I just helped optimize the one function, and it solved like a real problem for them at that time. So they're like, dude, you have the job. That's fine.
That's perfect.
Yeah. So, and there was a few other things, of course, but like, and they also did ask standard questions. It's not like they didn't, but I think the thing they were mainly looking for was more contextual than something else. So it is tough. Another reason it's tough is because it is like saturated, right? There's lots of devs. There's lots of like app devs, for example.
Yeah.
So, but I think you'll probably know. I think you're a pretty smart guy, man. You'll know who's good and who's not for you.
I was more asking that from a general question for folks who see this later, because I get asked a lot of questions about how to hire for that. In case
it's that I'm telling you, context. Stay on context.
Yeah, and this is, we run into this a lot where it's like, well, what I need is I need these 50 different things, and I always start my gigs that I do with like, stop completely. What are you trying to build? And let us make sure we understand. Like, I think too many people who aren't experts in something are the same very people who are like, I know exactly what I want you to build. And you're like, why do you think that you know exactly what I want to build if you want me to come in and build it, right? I think that's a big deal. This is so funny. Like, this is exactly what I do all day. I work within what we call integrated contextual analytics that work within workflows, right? So, I mean, we can do it all. I can do it all, but like, my specialty is really like, you're grabbing the steering wheel of your car, you have descriptive and diagnostic information in front of you, you have actionable AI next to you in the form of your GPS. Like, that's what we're trying to deliver at scale. So more to come on this front. I'll let you know how it's going.
It's gonna be exciting, man. Exciting news. Happy for you.
Yeah. I mean, look, I'm just trying to flip it for a couple $100 million and then full time on.
Oh, that's it. That's all.
Nowadays, I mean, I might be able to raise that in round 1 if I wanted to nowadays. Cool.
That's true. That's fair. All right, well, guys, we're trying to keep these podcasts short just because we don't actually eat lunch and we get really hungry, and we're big guys and we definitely need to eat our sandwiches. So we will cap it off here. Feel free to follow the channel if you guys like the stuff, or just reach us on Twitter and let us know if you guys want us to talk about specific topics, or else we're just going to talk about like our own garbage. So I'll leave you guys with that. Until then, until the next time, we'll catch y'all later. Peace.
Enjoy your lunch. See ya.